Welcome everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you for joining me for this discussion topic. Where did glam metal go and what really killed it? Lots of people attribute grunge to having killed glam, but I'm going to make the case that grunge didn't actually kill glam and it didn't actually go anywhere, it just morphed. But before we go into all that, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the video, please share it, help get the word out that way. I would also appreciate it. And of course, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with today's discussion topic, where did glam metal go and what really killed it? So to start, major bands started dropping the glam image and sound. You know, we have Motley Crue, starting around 1987, but certainly by 1989 in Dr. Feelgood, a lot of that glam image and sound was gone. GNR had done it by 1991 with the Use Your Illusion albums, Skid Row in 1991, Poison had dropped it by 1993 in their Native Tongue album, and Cinderella a little later by 1994. So this was all being stripped back slowly as we moved through this time. And then there were newer bands that were being signed, but they were more in the blues rock vein, straight ahead rock sort of sound. Black Crowes, Shake Your Moneymaker, 1990. And then the Four Horsemen on a major label for Nobody Said It Was Easy, 1991. So bands being signed, the sounds that were coming out, the major bands that had started all of this, it was slowly moving and shifting away. Then there was more experimental and unique bands that were getting signed, like Love Hate with their 1990 album, which had some odd time signatures and things of that nature on it. Saigon Kick, 1991, their debut comes out, and this is more in line with the alternative movement and bands like Jane's Addiction. Also in 1991, we have White Trash, which has ska and a brass section playing with them in their music. And then 1992 in T-Ride, and one of the most different bands, had some really complex arrangements that they were doing with their music, really changing things up that way. But the other thing is that record labels started to really go overboard and flooded the market. So you had the top tier, what they always refer to as the A-level bands, the Motley Crue, the Bon Jovis, the bands like those. Next up, you had your B-level, the second tier. And that would be like Poison and Cinderella, bands that had been signed around 86, getting albums out around 87, give or take, that sort of time frame. And then the C level, the next generation of these bands, the third tier, so Slaughter, Winger, Warrant, bands like that. And then it just kept going down from there to, D-level bands like Enough's Enough and Pretty Boy Floyd. This is not to say that any of these bands are less good than other ones. It's just that they move down the ladder and they continue to progressively do more and more and more of what started the movement, as opposed to moving on and doing new things. In the case of like these D-level bands like Enough's Enough and Pretty Boy Floyd, they kind of went to an extreme. I mean, these were glam bands to the nth degree that were just really, really doing it over the top when they were putting out their first albums and music videos and things of that nature. And any of you guys that have watched the music videos or seen photos of both Enough's Enough or Pretty Boy Floyd know exactly what I'm talking about when I'm saying that they overdid the whole glam thing. I mean, Poison did it first, but these bands took it to the next level. And the thing is that still there were big selling rock albums in 1991 and through to 1995, almost the whole bulk of the grunge movement, starting with GNR and Use Your Illusion. These guys started in 86, 87 and were certainly part of the glam movement, although they shed it pretty quick and of course rose above it. But these two albums each went on to sell 7 million copies apiece. Def Leppard, Adrenalize, which came out in 1992, so after grunge had already hit, this sells 3 million copies. We got a new band, Jackal, 1992. This album sold 1 million copies, so it wasn't just the established name bands that were doing this. You had other bands continuing on, like Warrant putting out their third album, still managing to sell gold, which is 500,000 copies. You also had Slaughter doing it with The Wildlife. Both those albums are 1992. And as I mentioned earlier, Poison, Native Tongue, they had shed the glam image by this time, going with a more bluesy, southern rock sort of sound, acoustic kind of based sound here. Also with new guitar player Richie Kotzen. This album goes gold. And, main classic rockers, Aerosmith, who had been, reclimbing the charts from Permanent Vacation on through Pump and now with this, but this is 1993, and Get a Grip does 7 million in sales. By 1994, Tesla's putting out Bust a Nut, it goes gold. And then Queensryche, which might not necessarily be considered part of the glam movement, but we're definitely, part of that era. 1994, it sells 1 million copies. By 95, you've got AC/DC Ballbreaker, 2 million copies. And also in 1995, Van Halen Balance does 3 million in sales. So there was no shortage of big name rock albums doing big sales all throughout the grunge movement. It wasn't like it just nosedived and dropped off completely. It's just that a lot of this stuff didn't get publicity or coverage. So, the question being, did grunge kill glam? And I think not specifically, because grunge is really just a movement. It wasn't one particular thing, and record labels themselves just follow the money. So it wasn't them necessarily either doing this. Let's remember the timeline though. So Pearl Jam releases 10 on August 27th of 1991, and Nirvana releases Nevermind on September 24th of 1991. Arguably that is considered the start or the boom of grunge. But within a month of each other, you have Pearl Jam, you have Nirvana. Now, two other things that for me always epitomized the shift and the change, the things that I saw that I kind of said, oh wow, this is no longer, glam metal, hair bands, all that sort of stuff are no longer cool. And that was one of the things being Metallica and the Nothing Else Matters music video that was released in 1992, where you had one of the band members throwing darts at a poster of Kip Winger from Winger. And I remember thinking that was really odd, because I was a big fan of Kip Winger, or the band Winger. So that really stuck out in my mind, but that was in 1992. It wasn't like that was beforehand. And then the other thing being Beavis and Butthead and, Stuart, the nerdy little neighbor wearing the Winger t-shirt, which was saying it wasn't cool. It wasn't AC/DC or Metallica like Beavis and Butthead. And so that wasn't until 1993. So these things that initially I would have said, well, Beavis and Butthead did it, Metallica did it, all these sort of things came actually later than some of these big name bands putting out these albums that changed the face of music with grunge. Did all of these things help? Certainly. All of these things contribute? Yes, I think so. But, the question being, what really killed glam metal and hair bands? And I think it's the combination of three things here. One, the oversaturation of the marketplace. All these bands began to sound the same, in my opinion. There were still some standout bands, some of the ones that I mentioned that were the unique ones, Saigon Kick, T-Ride, stuff like that. But a lot of the bands being signed really just had that cookie cutter sound as the industry tried to milk out the last little vestige that they could from that. Media moving on to the next big thing, I think, is the primary aspect to this that killed it, because once the media stops promoting and supporting all of these bands and moves on to something else. There was no outlet for it. When MTV stopped showing the videos, when the music magazines stopped calling for interviews and doing cover stories and all of that sort of stuff, and the record labels stopped putting money behind these bands to go on tour and all of that. So it was a big thing about the promotion and the media being pulled away from these bands. And as I said, so with the record labels not promoting or helping these bands, this idea that the record labels didn't stand by these artists and dropped them. And as a lot of these bands got dropped, there were less bands around, less of that stuff to be played with, so voids had to be filled, and radio stations who were still carrying on and playing this music well after MTV had stopped suddenly had to start moving on to other things. So again, a combination of all three of those things, I think, are really the things that killed off glam. But you know, where did glam go? It didn't just die. It didn't just stop. It wasn't a black and white into things. So I mentioned Black Crowes being one of those blues rock bands getting signed earlier on, and in 1992 they're putting out the Southern Harmony and Musical Companion, which was a very big album for them, and continuing on, but doing even more so than Shake Your Moneymaker in terms of stripping away that last vestige of the 80s rock sound that they had on the debut. And then there were bands like Animal Bag that got signed and put out an album in 92. And moving into 93, we have Brother Cane. And remember their big song, Got No Shame. Another band, Cry of Love, and the song Peace Pipe. That was 93. And then Screamin' Cheetah Willies and Shakin' the Blues was a real big song off here, among a couple others. So there's these bands in 92, 93 that are putting out albums that are still rock and roll, that still have the blues rock, but have really stripped away all of that last vestige of what was that 80s rock sound or the glam rock hair band sound. And of course, they didn't have the appearance of any of that either. So people looked past that, still listening to it as just good rock. And I think the other big thing that happened was classic rock returned in a really big way. So you had, artists like Meatloaf with Bat Out of Hell 2 that came out in 1993 that was just a huge, seller. Boston puts out Walk On in 1994 that's a million seller. Styx reunites in 1995, records a couple new tracks and puts out a greatest hits. Foreigner, they didn't break up, but Lou Gramm rejoins the band and they put out Mr. Moonlight in 1995. Night Ranger reunites in 1996, and Journey reunites in 1996 and puts out Trial by Fire. So again, you have the moving of, or the shifting of the guard to the blues rock and to classic rock kind of gaining its foothold on things, or its crown, so to speak. And so that's filling the void of the things that were left by the glam metal, giving it somewhere to go in this instance. And of course, as I mentioned with a lot of these classic rock bands, like Styx and Foreigner, you had guys that from the Damn Yankees that were big in 1990 with their glam metal hairband style sounds, going back to their respective bands and so forth, and Neil Schon from Hardline and Bad English going back to Journey and stuff like that. So you had those guys just shifting, moving parallel, moving over. So, wrapping this up here, arguably grunge ended when Kurt Cobain committed suicide on April 5th in 1994, but the movement itself did linger on until 1996, lasted about 5 years. But I believe in the end of the day, grunge just burned itself out the way punk did. It was an unsustainable movement with all of its angst and lack of flash and showmanship. People wanted more, in my opinion. They wanted to be entertained again. After 5 years of that, they just were ready to be entertained. And a lot of these newer bands and these classic rock bands offered that up. Case in point with Kiss, reforming, putting on the makeup, doing a stadium tour, filling that void after for so long not wearing the makeup, not quote needing to do that, they found a way to survive. And so, these people, the fans, they want to be entertained. And, one of the reasons that glam metal, hair bands, 80s rock, whatever you want to call them, lasted so long, I think was because of its good vibes, its good time feel, the partying, having fun, the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll. What more could you want, right? And I think that that's what lasted, that's what sustained it. So some of these other movements that last so short, like punk and grunge and things of that nature, I think it's because they don't have that positive, uplifting, type fun time, enjoyable sort of message that can fit any time. Sure, the angst and things of that nature can fit any sort of teen youth sort of thing, but it's in a different way, and it's a much smaller market in my opinion. So in my opinion, at least, that's what happened to glam metal. It's what, and those three factors are what I feel killed it off. And I don't think that it was really the grunge sound or grunge movement. It was just actually where media went and moved to. And unfortunately, these great bands that we loved lost their promotion, lost their platform, and didn't have any way to continue with it. And things had to move sideways and move into classic rock and other things of that nature. So there you go. Hope you guys enjoyed this discussion topic. Leave your comments in the description, or sorry, in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts on this and whether you agree or disagree. I hope everyone has a great day, and I'll talk to you all real soon. Bye, everyone.